Hello and welcome to another political dialogue program. Today we're going to have very important guest, Professor Jeff Miley from Cambridge University, and we will talk about the latest developments in the Middle East, as well as we always do, we will talk about the importance of freedom for Kurdish leader Mr. Abdullah Öcalan as well. Hello, Jeff.
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us, Jeff, today. Let's start with the first question. As you follow the developments in Middle East, after the Kurdish leader Öcalan's democracy call in Turkey, the Kurdish movement again take a step forward, and then they make a press release on Sunday. So according to these developments, what is your observations? How important is this step forward from the Kurdish movement? Please, you can start.
Yeah, well, I think that this development demonstrates the seriousness of Öcalan and the Kurdish movement with respect to their commitment to the peace process. This is something that we have to understand is part of Öcalan's ideas for the construction of a democratic society in Turkey and a broader peace process for the Middle East. So we have to think about the call for peace that Öcalan's been making against the geopolitical backdrop of war in the Middle East, never-ending war in the Middle East, and in particular the assault that was going on upon the Kurds in Syria from Turkey. I think that when we put it in the broader context of war going on, this move to sort of make unilateral move towards a peace process, I think is very instructive for what needs to happen across the greater Middle East, and in particular, if you think about the developments in with the drone warfare, the developments of the military apparatus of the Turkish state, I think that there was a clear possibility of genocide, like we saw in Afrin already with respect to the ethnic cleansing of Afrin, being perhaps more generally committed across the northeast of Syria. And I think that Öcalan's call for peace is very timely because of the way in which it can sort of defuse these temptations to move in a genocidal direction, temptations that we've seen have gone. The world has been watching and doing nothing with the genocide unfolding in Palestine. And I think that similar possibility for the northeast of Syria was effectively avoided by Öcalan's call for peace at the time that he called for peace. He's been calling for peace for a long time, but I think that this moment is particularly pragmatic moment for avoiding a catastrophe.
Thank you, Jeff. Also, as you follow the latest development in Turkey, the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer has visited Turkey and just signed $8 billion worth of arms trade, which will be the Eurofighter jets, 20 of them, and it will cost Turkey £8 billion, which is a huge money, and one of the biggest agreements between Turkey and Britain has been done lately in the history. So according to, we're talking about peace process, we're talking about the democratization of Turkey, but on the other hand, while we are expecting Britain, France or Germany and European countries, the Western powers, to support the peace process, they're selling arms to Turkey. So how strange is that? How does that look like from outside?
It's strange indeed, and it shows the trajectory towards never-ending war that the capitalist powers are on in the contemporary period, and certainly Turkey remains very much in the geopolitical warmongering mode. I think that again, what Öcalan is trying to do is trying to create the conditions for a democratic possibility against the winds of fascism, and he's trying to defang fascism in Turkey by taking away the excuse that there's a guerrilla insurgency. I think he's trying to create the conditions for a democratic peace. But you're right, he's up against powerful actors that want war, and they want more war, and they want to arm themselves to the teeth. And so I think that that there is the great contradiction, and that's why we need Öcalan to speak and Öcalan to have more and more influence on the contemporary events.
Thank you, Professor. Also, another important issue is about the visits to Öcalan. As you know that, yes, as Mr. Öcalan is still available to send some messages, but the visiting to Öcalan is so limited right now, and there is no possible way for him to work on the peace process to build up the democratic society. So in that case, while the peace process is still continues, how important is freedom for Öcalan? How important to let him be able to work freely on this process?
Yeah, I was with Judge Essa Musa back in the day, and Essa Musa used to always say that Öcalan is a key role player in any peace process, and that Öcalan's freedom is a precondition for true peace negotiations. And so I think that it's very important to always advocate more and more freedom for Öcalan, more and more influence for Öcalan. The more that Öcalan has a say, the more that peace becomes a true possibility. And so I think it's crucial for peace and a just peace, one that is associated with the construction of a democratic society and creates the preconditions in which democratic confederalism can be constructed.
Thank you, Jeff. Also, the important issue we need to talk with you as well is the international solidarity's importance. Basically, Öcalan's ideas is not just for solution for the Kurdish-Turkish conflict, and it's what the Kurds are saying. The Öcalan's ideas are to make the whole world better place to live. So how important is the international solidarity in that case, specifically during this period while this peace process continues and the Western powers are still seeking for wars in the Middle East?
Yeah, I think international solidarity at the level of the grassroots is really important. I think people need to be thinking about democratic confederalism as the alternative to the ongoing wars and destruction of capitalist modernity. I think that Öcalan's manifesto remains a lightning rod for the West, not only for the West, but internationally. As you know, I've spent time in Nairobi, and in Nairobi, people are very interested in the ideas of Öcalan and trying to think about ways in which in the informal settlements of Nairobi, they can construct self-governing institutions from the bottom up, a democratic and federal style. They can push for gender emancipation. They can push for ecological sustainability. So thinking about the pillars of democratic confederalism, I think that international support for Rojava remains also significant and important. And I think that the Kurdish movement has placed itself at the vanguard of the freedom struggle for the 21st century, precisely because Öcalan's ideas, the power of Öcalan's ideas, as providing an alternative to capitalist modernity, a democratic alternative, a democratic way forward. I think that that's the only way that we're gonna escape the spiraling of chaos and violence that the world finds itself immersed in.
Thank you, Jeff. Also, as you mentioned, you have been in Kenya, Nairobi, where the Öcalan has been abducted in 1999. So I really want you to explain what really goes in there, how the grassroots communities are involving with the Öcalan's ideas. What was your observations lately when you visit there?
Yeah, I have the idea for a manuscript titled Öcalan in Nairobi, Past, Present, and Future, that would deal with the past insofar as the abduction and the circumstances surrounding the abduction and what those circumstances tell us about the neo-colonial nature of the Kenyan government. That's in the past. But that past remains because there's a kind of institutional memory of Öcalan as this person who was abducted in Kenya, and people in the social justice movement around Kenya, they feel some sort of revindication needs to be made for Öcalan, for the freedom of Öcalan, particularly because their government was involved in the abduction. It was on Kenyan soil that he was abducted. So there's a past, there's a present, and there's a future to Öcalan's ideas. Öcalan's ideas, back in 2018, I had just published my book, Your Freedom and Mine, on the ideas of Abdullah Öcalan in Erdogan's Turkey, which was published by Black Rose Press. And I took some copies with me to Nairobi when I went to Nairobi, and I distributed those copies and some other material about the Kurdish movement in the informal settlements and around the informal settlements, and I proposed a dialogue about what democratic confederalism is, to try to explain what democratic confederalism is, and people were very excited about the ideas. And they thought, give me more of these ideas. I want to find out more. They found out about Sakina, for instance, women coming up to me saying, tell me about Sakina. I want to learn about Sakina. I want to learn about Sarah. And all kinds of interest in the ideas of grassroots democracy, understood as radical democracy from the bottom up, the pillars of radical democracy, gender emancipation. They were very interested in gender emancipation, ecological sustainability, multicultural accommodation. All these things they felt were very important lessons for their own movement in the informal settlements, pushing for kind of community empowerment and self-determination. And they would say, we had self-determination. We had a liberation movement like the PKK. We had the Mau Mau, but the Mau Mau came down from the mountains and were defeated, and ultimately, and we never got our freedom. And so even though we have flag independence, we don't have self-determination. We need something like what Ocalan is arguing for. We need self-determination understood as democratic and federalism. And so there's a lot of people, even though it's not at all something that everyone agrees with, because there remains some sort of staunch communists, obviously, mobilizing in the informal settlements, pushing for democratic centralism. But the democratic and federalism, particularly at the grassroots amongst the community level, is something that generated lots of enthusiasm. And people feel, again, this historic debt to Ocalan precisely because he was abducted in the past in Nairobi. But for that very reason, I think there's a future to Ocalan's ideas in Nairobi, and that future we already witnessed in the Gen Z protests, where people pushing for, they're calling it the leaderless protest, where they occupied the parliament and they almost took power even. And so the government has since in the last year been very repressive, but the movement remains strong and committed to ideas, and the influence of Ocalan remains quite impressive. So I think Kurdish people should know about this, how popular Ocalan's ideas prove in the global South.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jeff. Very shortly, very briefly, last question is about the 8th November. As you know, the Kurds and their friends will be in Köln for a big protest for freedom for Öcalan. What is your support message to this protest, and what is your call to the communities to be there on time on this day to free Öcalan?
Yeah, my call is for everyone to come out into the streets and to make clear the unanimity of voices in favor of Ocalan's freedom, that Ocalan is a world historical figure who has a message of peace, a message of democratic confederalism, which provides an alternative to the sickening and destructive trajectory of capitalist modernity. So those of us who care for that alternative, we care for Ocalan and his fate, and as well as the importance of Ocalan in any peace process in Turkey. And so we want Ocalan to be free now. 26 years is long enough.
Thank you, Professor Jeff Miley from Cambridge University. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your valuable comments.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. We just came to an end of another political dialogue program. We spoke to Professor Jeff Miley from Cambridge University, and our topic has been about the importance of freedom for Öcalan, as well as the latest developments according to the Middle East. Thanks for listening to us.